It was never just a game. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone. I don't want to type this, but I don't have a choice anymore. I need to tell you about the game. And if you're the person it's looking for, if you're the one it's after, it'll find you. I wish I could tell you there was an escape. I was once exactly like all of you reading this. Just an average horror fan trying to find a cheap adrenaline rush at 3 a.m. I scoured Reddit and far beyond for a good story. Of course, among these stories were games. Stuff like, once you know the rules, you're in. None of those are real. Last week, I came across a Reddit post. It was simply entitled, The Game. What was strange about this post was it was posted 0 seconds ago, and it had no upvotes. This wouldn't have been unusual, save for the fact that I wasn't sorting by new. Naturally, this piqued my interest. I brushed it off as a glitch and read the post. I would tell you to stop reading this. I would tell you to never play the game. Of course, it won't stop you. It never does. But it needs me to tell you the rules. Whether you play or not is your choice. You play because you want to. 1. Knock on a mirror in the dark to start. 2. Don't look out the windows at night. 3. Don't sleep where it can see you. 4. Every time you break the rules, you make a choice. Those are the rules. The strangest thing was, the post completely disappeared after I read it. I was back on nosleep. Everything was as usual. I brushed it off as a half-baked attempt at a cheap scare. Life as usual continued, but something about those words haunted me. I found myself staying up even later than usual, forgetting to eat, forgetting where I was or what I was doing. My girlfriend, who I was living with at the time, was concerned for my well-being. The rules haunted me, for reasons I found unfathomable. Things got rough when I forgot my girlfriend's birthday. Every year, until that year, I had gotten her flowers, presents, the whole 9 yards. And all I had done that day so far was stare into the bathroom mirror with the lights off and paper taped over the windows, staring at my own demented reflection. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, I found her crying. I felt horrible. She asked me why I'd been distant. She asked what she'd done to merit this cold behavior. I finally told her the truth. She laughed at first, then she was angry, then she was sympathetic. She was also a horror fan, so we agreed to do the game together that night. The moment the plans were made, I felt lighter, happier. I made a last-minute reservation at her favorite restaurant, threw together some last-minute plans, and we enjoyed the day together. I finally felt like myself, and wondered why it had ever bothered me in the first place. When we got back to our apartment, we both went into the bathroom and knocked on the mirror. We waited in the dark for a minute or so. When I turned away to flick on the light switch, I could swear my reflection was smiling. Still, I blamed it on my tipsiness and the atmosphere, a trick of the half-drunk mind in a dark room. It amazes me how much the mind can rationalize the unexplainable. I woke up in the morning with a half-formed hangover and a pit of dread in my stomach. I turned to the clock beside me and realized that it was 5 a.m., and considering last night's events and the fact that it was Saturday, I was surprised that I even woke up this morning. I was more surprised that my girlfriend was nowhere to be seen. After a few minutes, I groggily walked around the house, searching for a note, for any clue as where she could have gone. After an hour passed, I called the cops. They said that she had to be missing for 24 hours before I could even file a report. I was panicking at this point. By the time 8 a.m. rolled around, I had called her mom, her siblings, and her boss. No overtime, no family events, nothing. I thought back to the game, and even though it made no sense, I walked to the bathroom mirror. My gut told me to walk there, and my feet moved with no directive from my head. The door swung open with a creak. I stared at the mirror, mortified to see nothing. I rubbed my eyes, rubbed the mirror, but the lack of reflection stayed the same. A cold, black, glossy void. Slowly, as if someone was creating letters in the foggy glass, Letters etched themselves out into the mirror, revealing the smiling face of my girlfriend through letters. Hand or foot? I was terrified, frozen to the floor. I was going crazy. I was losing it. I scrambled to the kitchen sink, slamming the bathroom door behind me. The kitchen window spilled out those same foggy letters, those same beautiful eyes and horrible smile staring back at me. It wasn't her smile. It was too unnatural, too unreal. I don't know why I did it, but my arm moved without license from my head. Foot, my hand wrote out, slowly and shakily. The Windows image suddenly went back to normal. I was in shock, so I crawled back into the bed, desperate for all to have been a dream. Despite all odds, I fell asleep. I woke up again to my girlfriend screaming. I bolted out of bed, ran to the kitchen. My girlfriend was laying on the floor, sobbing. Gore sprayed across the cabinets like someone blended up raw beef and tomato sauce. The bone of her leg was clearly showing, and her lack of a left foot was apparent. I vomited on the floor, the repercussions of my actions catching up to me. I lunged for the phone and dialed 911. I sat in the ambulance and held her hand. I called her boss to say she couldn't come into work for some time. When I mentioned my earlier call, he was confused. He said he'd been asleep and that there was no missed calls. The surgery took several hours and I called her immediate family, who also seemingly had no recollection of my earlier calls. I spared them the gory details. She was groggy and half high on painkillers when I finally able to see her, and confided to her what happened earlier in the morning. I asked her what happened, and she told me that she couldn't even describe it. She broke down crying. I didn't press her for details. I asked her what choice she made, and she said she hadn't gotten one. To this day, I still don't know why the game didn't want her, but I'm thankful at least for the fact that she didn't have to suffer through it. Suspicion fell onto me, seeing as I was the only other person living in the house with her. I told the police what happened, and my girlfriend was deemed too traumatized to give a statement just yet. They kept her in the hospital that night, and I wasn't allowed to stay overnight. I booked a crappy hotel near the hospital and covered all the mirrors. Curtains were closed. I didn't know how it could see me, but evidently it worked. Somehow I fell asleep, but I woke up at 8, perfectly fine. My boss granted me 2 weeks leave, and I spent some time getting interrogated by the police and tending to my girlfriend. 2 nights later, the knocking started. At first, it was a slight tapping on the windows, something you could easily mistake for branches. Then it got louder. All the windows, all the mirrors in the room radiated with the knocking so loud it drowned out even the Metallica blaring through my headphones. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I don't know exactly when the screaming started, but it did. I know what it wants. It wants me to look out the windows. Night before last, I gave in. I looked out the windows, and the screaming finally stopped. I can't describe what I saw. It was sickening, but it gave me a choice. And I'm sorry to admit that it was easy. My girlfriend's funeral is in 2 weeks, but believe me, the alternative was so much worse. I think I'm going crazy. Tonight, it gave me another choice. I know how the game works now. I know what it wants. The choices it gives aren't really choices. It knows you. It devours you. And there's no getting out. For most of you, the game will do nothing. But for an unlucky few, it'll work. It will consume you. I'm sorry.